The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Alliance sparkled like a jewel among the stars. Its crystal walls reflected the light of 3 suns, creating rainbow patterns across the worried faces of the most powerful beings in the known universe. Today, these faces showed more concern than usual. "Another mining facility has been destroyed," announced Head Counselor Blue, his antenna drooping in distress. "That makes it the 5th one this month." The council members stirred uneasily in their hover seats. The loss of mining facilities wasn't just about resources anymore. It was becoming a serious threat to their civilization's stability. "Show us the footage," ordered Deputy Councilor Green, his scaled skin shifting colors with anxiety. A hologram appeared in the center of the chamber, displaying the ruins of what had once been their most advanced mining operation on planet X789. The massive machines lay in twisted heaps, as if something had torn through them like paper. The destruction was total, yet their sensors had detected nothing. No energy signatures, no biological traces, nothing. "Our best security systems failed again," reported technical expert White, his crystalline form glittering with frustration. "Whatever is destroying our facilities doesn't show up on any of our scans. It's like fighting a ghost." Junior Council Member Tom, the youngest of the group, had been quiet until now. Unlike the others, who had hundreds of years of experience, he had only served for 20 cycles. Perhaps that's why he dared to suggest what no one else would. "What if," he started, then paused as all eyes turned to him. "What if we asked the humans for help?" The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. "Ask the humans, the newcomers, the Deathworlders. They've only been part of the Alliance for 3 cycles," protested Councilor Red, his gas form swirling in agitation. "They barely have space travel." "Exactly," Tom replied, gaining confidence. "They're from a world that would kill any of us in minutes. They've survived predators, natural disasters, and hostile environments that make our worst dangers look like entertainment. Maybe we need that perspective." Head Counselor Blue raised all 4 hands for silence. "Elaborate," Junior Member Tom. "Our technology is superior to theirs in every way," Tom explained. "Yet they survive on a planet that should be impossible to inhabit. They deal with creatures that actively try to kill them, weather that can change from burning to freezing in a single day, and ground that occasionally splits open to spew molten rock. They call these things normal." The council members exchanged uncomfortable looks. Earth's classification as a death world wasn't just about its high gravity or extreme weather. It was about the sheer variety of ways it could kill you. Even their most advanced environmental suits couldn't guarantee survival there. "And how would these humans help us with our highly advanced mining operations?" Technical expert White asked, his tone dripping with skepticism. Tom activated his datapad, projecting images of Earth's mining operations. They seemed primitive compared to the Alliance's automated systems, but something stood out: they were still running. "Humans have been mining their world for centuries," Tom said. "They've dealt with cave-ins, toxic gases, underground floods, and whatever else their planet throws at them. They've learned to expect the unexpected. Maybe that's exactly what we need." Head Counselor Blue's antenna twitched thoughtfully. "The loss of another facility would severely impact our resource production. Perhaps it's time to try something different." The vote was closer than usual, but in the end, desperation won over pride. The Grand Council of the Galactic Alliance, masters of technology that could reshape planets, decided to ask for help from a species that still used combustion engines. As the message was sent toward Earth, Junior Member Tom couldn't help but wonder what sort of human they would send. He hoped they would send their best, someone who could solve this mystery before more facilities were lost. Little did he know, the human they would get would change everything they thought they knew about problem-solving, technology, and the true meaning of advanced civilization. 3 days after sending their request to Earth, the Grand Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy. The human representative was due to arrive any minute. The council members had expected Earth to send a team of their top scientists or military experts. Instead, they were getting just one human. The transport beam hummed to life, and a single figure materialized in the center of the chamber. The council members leaned forward, then tried to hide their disappointment. James Miller stood there, looking utterly ordinary in worn work boots, faded blue overalls, and a hard hat tucked under his arm. His weathered face and gray-streaked beard suggested he'd spent more time under the sun than in laboratories. A beaten leather bag hung from his shoulder, containing what appeared to be simple tools. "G'day," he said, looking around the magnificent chamber with mild interest. "I'm James. Earth Control said you folks have got a bit of a mining problem." Head Counselor Blue's antenna twitched in disbelief. "You are Earth's chosen expert. 25 years as a mining safety inspector in the Australian outback," James replied, setting down his bag. "Dealt with everything from cave-ins to cranky wildlife. They tell me you've lost 5 facilities." Technical expert White floated forward, his crystalline form pulsing with barely contained irritation. "These are not simple mines, human. Our facilities are fully automated, utilizing quantum phase extraction technology and nanomolecular refinement processes." James pulled out a notebook, an actual paper notebook, and a pencil. "Right. But there's still holes in the ground, yeah. Let's start with the basics. What sort of ground surveys did you do before setting up?" "Our quantum scanners analyzed the planetary composition to a depth of 50 kilometers, White replied stiffly. "Not what I meant," James said, making notes. "Did anyone actually walk the ground? Check for signs of life. Look for burrows, tracks, that sort of thing." The council members exchanged confused looks. Walk the ground? In person? Junior member Tom, who had supported bringing in a human, felt his hopes sinking. "Our environmental drones conduct all necessary surface surveys. Physical inspection would be primitive." James looked up from his notebook, his eyes twinkling with something that might have been amusement. "You'd be surprised how much you miss when you're not getting your boots dirty. Now about your safety protocols. What's your standard procedure when equipment detects unusual vibrations?" "Our systems automatically adjust to compensate for any seismic disturbances," Deputy Councilor Green stated proudly. "So they keep running. No shutdown, no investigation." James made another note, shaking his head slightly. "Why would we shut down?" Red's gaseous form swirled in confusion. "Our equipment is designed to operate in all conditions." James closed his notebook and looked around the chamber. His expression reminded Tom of his old teaching unit when students missed an obvious answer. "Back home," James said slowly, "if something's making the ground shake in a mine, we tend to assume it's bad news until proven otherwise. Could be structural problems, could be water pocket, could be something living down there that doesn't want company." "Living?" Blue's antenna shot straight up. "Our scans show no significant life forms in the mining zones." James picked up his bag. "Tell you what, instead of discussing what your scans don't show, how about we go have a look at what's actually there? I'd like to see one of these wrecked facilities in person." The council members stirred uncomfortably. The idea of physical inspection seemed unnecessarily dangerous and primitive, but they had asked for human help, and this was what they got. Head Counselor Blue signaled agreement. "Junior member Tom will accompany you, along with a security detail." "No security needed," James said, already heading toward the transport area. "Just Tom, and maybe someone who knows how your machines work. Oh, and we'll need some basic supplies: water, emergency lights, first aid kit." "But our environmental suits provide everything necessary," Tom protested. James turned back, and this time his smile had a hint of pity. "Son, if something's big enough to tear apart your mining rigs, I reckon we might want to pack a few extras, just in case." As Tom hurried to follow the human, he couldn't shake the feeling that they'd either made a terrible mistake or the best decision in council history. Either way, things were about to get interesting. The mining facility on planet X789 looked worse in person than it had in the holograms. Massive machines lay scattered like broken toys across the rocky landscape. The main drilling platform, a structure that had once towered 50 meters high, now lay crumpled in a twisted heap of metal and circuitry. James walked slowly around the wreckage, occasionally stopping to pick up pieces of debris or examine marks on the ground. Tom followed nervously, his hover suit humming in the thin atmosphere. Technical expert White had joined them, though he clearly wished he hadn't. "Interesting," James muttered, crouching to examine some deep grooves in the bedrock. He pulled a small measuring tape from his bag and held it against the marks. What could possibly be interesting about random damage patterns? White's crystalline form flickered with impatience. James stood up, brushing dust from his knees. "These aren't random. See these grooves? They're evenly spaced, about 40 centimeters apart. And they curve, like something was grabbing and pulling." Tom moved closer, really looking at the marks for the first time. "But our scans show." "Let's forget the scans for a minute," James interrupted gently. He pointed to a large piece of twisted metal. "Look at that drilling arm. What do you notice about how it's bent?" Tom and White studied the wreckage. Finally, White said, "The quantum phase generator has been completely destroyed." No. James walked over and ran his hand along the metal. "Look at the direction of the bend. It's not crushed or exploded outward. It's bent from the outside in, like something grabbed it," and he made a twisting motion with his hands. James reached into his bag and pulled out a small plastic container. He scraped something from the bent metal into it. "And look here, residue. Might be biological, might not, but something left it." White's crystalline form pulsed rapidly. "Impossible. Our sensors would have detected any biological traces. Unless," James said, pocketing the sample, "you weren't looking for the right kind of biology." He started walking toward a large hole in the ground, pulling out a powerful flashlight. Now, this is where things get really interesting. The hole was roughly circular, about 5 meters across. The edges were smooth, unlike the jagged tears in the machinery. James knelt at the edge, shining his light down. "Your machines were drilling straight down, right?" he asked. "Of course," White replied. "The most efficient path to the mineral deposits." James nodded. "But look at this tunnel. It slopes. Natural formation, I'd bet. And these marks along the walls. They're old. Whatever made them was here long before your machines." He stood up and walked in a wide circle around the site, occasionally consulting a compass and making notes. Tom noticed he kept looking at the ground, the horizon, and back at his notes, as if connecting invisible dots. "Right," James said finally, putting away his notebook. "I reckon I know what happened here. You've got borrowers." "We have what?" White and Tom asked simultaneously. "Borrowers. Big ones, judging by these marks. Underground creatures that dig tunnel networks. Probably been here for millions of years." James gestured at the destroyed facility. "Your machines drilled right into their territory, and they didn't much appreciate it." "But that's impossible," White protested. "Our comprehensive planetary surveys showed you what you expected to see," James finished. "Look, back home we've got animals that can hide from infrared cameras, sonar, and every other detection system we've made. Nature's clever that way." He pulled out his sample container again. "I'll bet if you analyze this residue, you'll find something interesting about its composition, something your scanners weren't programmed to look for." Tom felt a chill despite his environmental suit. "If you're right, how many of these borrowers do you think are out there?" James shrugged, but his expression was serious. "Hard to say. But look at the pattern of destroyed facilities on your map. I'll bet they form a circle, territory boundary. These aren't random attacks. This is something defending its home." As if to emphasize his point, a low rumble shook the ground beneath them. White's crystalline form trembled. "Perhaps we should return to the ship." "Good idea," James said, already walking calmly but quickly toward their transport. "And folks, try not to make any loud noises. We're guests here, and I don't think the locals are in a welcoming mood. Back in the safety of the orbital station, James spread his notes across a holographic table. The council members gathered around, their earlier skepticism replaced by nervous curiosity. The sample analysis had come back with shocking results. Silicon-based, technical expert White announced, his crystalline form dimming with embarrassment. The creatures are silicon-based life forms. Our bioscanners were calibrated only for carbon-based life. That's not all, James said, laying out a map he'd drawn. He'd marked the locations of all destroyed facilities with red dots. Look at the pattern. Head Counselor Blue's antenna twitched as he studied the map. It forms a perfect circle. Territory boundary, James explained, drawing a line connecting the dots. These borrowers are protecting their space. Each time we put a facility inside their territory, they removed it. Simple as that. But why didn't they attack when we first surveyed the planet? Deputy Counselor Green asked. James pulled out some sketches he'd made of the claw marks. Because you used quiet scanning drones, the real trouble started when you brought in the heavy drilling equipment. Those machines of yours, he tapped the drawings. They vibrate at exactly the wrong frequency. To these creatures, it probably sounds like a challenge roar. The council members exchanged worried looks. Junior member Tom leaned forward, fascinated. How can you be so sure? James activated a portable holoprojector he'd borrowed. It showed a three-dimensional reconstruction of the tunnel network he'd mapped out. See these patterns? Classic nest defense behavior. I've seen similar things in Earth creatures, just not quite this big. He pointed to several large chambers in the tunnel network. These are probably breeding grounds. And here, he highlighted several intersecting tunnels. These are hunting paths. Your machines didn't just make noise. They blocked important routes. Remarkable, White murmured, his crystalline structure sparkling with new interest. But how did we miss all this during construction? Because they're smart, James said, playing a simulation of the creature's movements based on his observations. They stayed away while the machines were being built. Watched. Learned. Then, when the drills started threatening their nursery chambers, he let the simulation show the devastating results. Red's gaseous form swirled anxiously. Then we must destroy these creatures before they destroy more facilities. We have plasma weapons that cooled. No, James's sharp tone made everyone jump. His face was stern as he continued more quietly. First, that'd be murder. These aren't mindless beasts. They're intelligent creatures protecting their homes. Second, it'd be stupid. You try plasma bombing those tunnels, you'll collapse half the mineral deposits you're trying to reach. Then what do you suggest? Blue asked, his antenna drooping. We need those minerals. James smiled and pulled out another map. We work around them. Look, the mineral deposits extend well beyond their territory. The deposits you're drilling for, they're just the closest to the surface. There are plenty more if you're willing to dig a bit deeper. He started marking new locations on the map. Set up here, here, and here, outside their territory, but still profitable. And he drew some lines. Build transport tubes between facilities, but raise them above ground. The borrowers don't seem interested in anything that doesn't dig into their space. Tom studied the new plan. The construction costs would be higher, but less than replacing destroyed facilities every month, James pointed out. Plus, think of the research potential. A whole new form of life, with mining techniques that might teach us something. Observation posts here and here cooled. Research, White interrupted. You think we could learn from them? James chuckled. Mate, they've been tunneling through solid rock for probably millions of years without quantum phase anything. I'd say they've got a few tricks worth learning. The council members began talking excitedly among themselves. Tom noticed James adding one more note to his journal. What else did you figure out? He asked. James showed him the note. It was a rough calculation of the borrower's population size based on tunnel volume and food requirements. Just making sure we give them enough space. On my world, we learned the hard way what happens when you don't respect the local wildlife. These borrowers, they're not the problem. They're the solution, if we're smart enough to learn from them. Tom looked at the human with new respect. Sometimes, he realized, the most advanced solution was knowing when not to use advanced technology at all. The next day, James stood before the Grand Council to present his detailed plan. The chamber's holographic systems displayed his simple drawings alongside complex 3D models created by technical expert White based on James's observations. The solution isn't high-tech, James began, pointing to his diagrams. It's about speaking the right language. In this case, vibrations and scent markers. These borrowers communicate through ground vibrations and chemical signals. We need to speak their language to set boundaries they'll understand. Head Counselor Blue leaned forward. And how do we do that without our advanced technology? James grinned and pulled out what looked like a simple metal rod from his bag. With this, back home, we use these to keep burrowing animals away from sensitive areas. It creates low-frequency vibrations that say territory marked in a way they understand. He stuck the rod into a sample of planet soil they'd brought up. The device began humming softly. Set these up in a ring around each new facility site. The borrowers will recognize it as a territory claim and stay clear. That's it. Red's gaseous form swirled with disbelief. A vibrating stick. Not quite, James continued. He pulled out several small containers. We also use these, chemical markers, similar to how the borrowers mark their own territories, but with a keep-away message they'll understand. Between the vibrations and the scent markers, we're basically putting up a fence they can read. White's crystalline form sparkled with interest. But will they respect these primitive markers? They should. Look here. James showed footage from a test site where they'd placed the markers the previous night. The ground scanning sensors showed borrower tunnels deliberately curving away from the marked area. They're already responding. These creatures aren't aggressive. They're territorial. Give them clear boundaries, and they'll respect them. Deputy Counselor Green studied the footage. And you're certain they won't just destroy these markers like they did our machines. The machines were invaders, James explained, drawing a simple diagram. These markers are more like diplomatic messages. We're not fighting them for territory anymore. We're negotiating. He laid out his complete implementation plan. Set up vibration markers and chemical signals around new facility locations. Build raised transport tubes between sites to avoid disturbing tunnel networks. Establish regular monitoring of borrower activity to ensure boundaries remain respected. Create an early warning system based on borrower movement patterns. Train facility staff to recognize signs of borrower distress before problems occur. The best part, James added, is that this solution costs about 1/10 what you've spent replacing destroyed facilities. And it's sustainable. Once the borrowers accept the new boundaries, they'll actually help protect our facilities from other threats. Tom raised his hand. How so? They're territorial, remember. Once they recognize our marked areas as not their problem, they'll keep other creatures away from the borders of their space, including our facilities. James showed more sensor readings. They're already doing it. See these smaller tunnel collapses? That's them sealing off approaches to our test site. The council members whispered among themselves, clearly impressed despite their initial skepticism. Even White's crystalline form glowed with reluctant approval. Head Counselor Blue raised all 4 hands for silence. Mr. Miller, your solution is unexpectedly elegant. But what happens if it fails? James packed away his tools calmly. That's the beauty of it. We'll know it's failing long before anything gets destroyed. These markers need regular maintenance. While maintaining them, we can monitor borrower reactions. If they start showing stress signs, we adjust before problems start. He looked around the chamber, meeting each council member's eyes. The real solution isn't the markers or the monitoring. It's respect. We're guests on their planet. Act like it, and they'll let us stay. Try to take over, and well, he gestured at the images of destroyed facilities. You've seen how that ends. The council voted unanimously to implement James's plan. As the chamber emptied, Tom stayed behind to help pack up the demonstration materials. I still can't believe the answer was so simple, Tom said. James smiled. Best solutions usually are. Sometimes you don't need quantum physics to solve a problem. Sometimes you just need to learn how to knock on the door politely instead of breaking it down. 1 month later, James stood at the edge of the new mining facility, watching the massive machines work in perfect harmony with the natural environment. The raised transport tubes gleamed in the alien sunlight, carrying minerals efficiently between processing stations. Most importantly, there hadn't been a single borrower attack. Time for the monthly check, he told Tom, who had become his regular assistant. They walked to the nearest marker post, their boots crunching on the rocky soil. James pulled out his testing kit, still the same simple tools he'd brought from Earth. The readings are fascinating, Tom said, checking his datapad. The borrowers have actually increased their activity, but they're completely avoiding our marked zones. James knelt to check the chemical marker levels. Better than that. Look here. He pointed to fresh claw marks around the marker post. They're reinforcing our markers with their own scent. They've accepted these boundaries as part of their territory system. Technical expert White materialized nearby, his crystalline form glowing with excitement. The research team has made incredible discoveries. The borrowers' tunnel-building techniques could revolutionize our mining methods. Not surprised, James said, replacing the marker's chemical capsule. They've been doing this for millions of years. Nature's usually got things figured out better than we do. They moved to the observation post, where multiple screens showed underground activity. The borrowers had developed a fascinating pattern. They'd created new tunnels that circled the mining zones, effectively incorporating the human-marked territories into their navigation routes. Look at this, Tom pointed to a screen showing deeper tunnel networks. They're actually helping us. When our sensors detect unstable ground, we've noticed the borrowers often reinforce those areas with their own structural supports before we even need to act. James nodded, making notes in his worn notebook. Cooperation, not competition. They're treating us like neighbors now instead of invaders. White's form sparkled with curiosity. But how did you know this would work? Our most advanced predictive models couldn't have anticipated this outcome. Because every living thing wants to survive, James explained, watching a group of borrowers on the scanner as they methodically reinforced a tunnel wall. These creatures didn't attack our facilities because they're violent. They did it because they thought they had to. Give them a choice that lets them thrive, and they'll take it. The success had led to changes in other mining operations across the galaxy. More species were beginning to adopt what they now called the Miller method, working with local life forms instead of trying to work around them. The Council wants to expand operations to the northern continent, Tom mentioned, showing James the plans. They want you to oversee the setup. James studied the maps, noting the tunnel patterns. We'll need to modify the marker spacing there. Look at how the tunnel networks are denser. Means smaller family groups, more territory boundaries to respect. White hovered closer. The Council also wants to understand how you knew what chemical markers to use. Our scientists are still analyzing the compounds. James laughed. I didn't know. I used markers that work on Earth's burrowing creatures and adjusted them based on the borrower's own scent marks. Sometimes you don't need to understand everything to respect it. As they walked back to the facility, a slight tremor shook the ground. Instead of panicking like they would have a month ago, the workers barely looked up. Through the observation windows, they could see a borrower pack moving through their tunnels, deliberately keeping their distance from the marked zones while going about their business. You know what the funny thing is? James said, watching the creatures. Back home, this would be revolutionary. Here, with all your advanced technology, the solution was to use something simpler. Tom nodded. The Council is already talking about establishing a permanent exchange program with Earth. They want to learn more primitive solutions. James smiled, closing his notebook. Nothing primitive about understanding nature, mate. Sometimes the most advanced civilization is the one that knows when to stop advancing and start listening. The facility hummed quietly in the background. It sounds now in harmony with the natural vibrations of the borrower's world, a testament to the fact that progress doesn't always mean conquering nature. Sometimes it means learning to live as part of it. 6 months after James Miller's arrival, the Grand Council chamber looked very different. The once pristine crystal walls now displayed holographic images of various alien creatures discovered using Earth observation methods. In the center, a large model showed the complex interaction between mining operations and natural ecosystems across dozens of worlds. The Miller method has been successfully implemented on 17 planets, Head Counselor Blue announced proudly. Mining efficiency has increased by 300%, while environmental incidents have dropped to near zero. James sat in a specially designed chair, finally replacing the hover seat that had made him queasy, looking slightly uncomfortable in his new formal uniform. They'd named him Director of Xenobiological Integration, though he still preferred his old work boots to the official footwear. It's not just the mining operations, technical expert White added, his crystalline form glowing brightly. By studying the borrower's tunneling techniques, we've revolutionized our underground construction methods. Their natural support structures are far more efficient than our engineered ones. Deputy Counselor Green activated a new hologram, showing various Earth creatures. We've also begun studying Earth's wildlife for other potential insights. Who knew that termite mounds could teach us about climate control, or that spider silk could improve our cable designs? That's why we're here today, Blue announced. The Council has unanimously voted to establish the Deathworld Knowledge Exchange Program. Mr. Miller, you'll be its first director. James scratched his beard thoughtfully. Fancy title for a simple idea. Learning from nature instead of fighting it. There's nothing simple about your contributions, Tom said. He'd been promoted to senior council member after the success of the Borrower project. You've changed how we approach problem solving across the galaxy. The chamber's displays showed footage from various mining sites. Borrowers now regularly patrol near the facilities, their territorial behavior actually protecting the operations they had once destroyed. Some sites had even developed symbiotic relationships with the creatures, using their natural tunneling abilities to locate new mineral deposits. The thing is, James said, standing up to address the council, you folks were so focused on being advanced that you forgot to be smart. Every problem doesn't need a high-tech solution. Sometimes you just need to step back and watch how nature solved it first. Red's gaseous form swirled thoughtfully. But surely Earth's harsh conditions forced you to develop this primitive wisdom, a survival necessity. James laughed. Nah, mate. We learned it by making mistakes. Big ones. Nearly wrecked our planet before we figured out that working with nature works better than working against it. You lot just got to skip that step. The Council had already begun implementing Earth-inspired solutions across their territories. Mining operations now included biological surveys conducted on foot. Environmental impact studies considered not just physical damage, but behavioral and territorial disruptions. Even their advanced sensors had been redesigned to detect a broader range of life forms. And the borrowers? Tom asked, pulling up footage of the original site. How are they adapting? Better than we could have hoped, James replied. They're treating our markers like natural territory boundaries. Some groups have even started using our abandoned survey holes as new tunnel entrances, with our permission, of course. They're not just tolerating us anymore. They're incorporating us into their world. Blue's antenna wiggled with satisfaction. The Council proposes to classify the borrowers as an intelligent species with protected status. Their territory will be officially recognized, and all future operations must respect their boundaries. About time, James said with a smile. They were here first, after all. As the meeting concluded, James walked to the observation deck with Tom. Below them, the planet's surface glittered with the lights of mining facilities, each surrounded by its ring of marker posts. Between them, invisible to most eyes, but clear on the sensors. The borrowers went about their business, sharing their world with the strange surface creatures who had finally learned to knock before entering. You know what the real lesson was, James said, watching a transport tube carry minerals across the landscape. It's not about being primitive or advanced. It's about being humble enough to learn, no matter how smart you think you are. Tom nodded, understanding at last why Earth's seemingly primitive approaches could solve problems their advanced technology couldn't. Sometimes the best way forward was to take a step back and listen to the wisdom that had been there all along. We had no clue, Tom admitted, so we called a Deathworlder. Turns out that was the smartest decision we ever made.